My grandfather, aged 98, served in the English military from 1940 to 1948. He has several medals from his time in the service. It also goes without saying, he has quite a few stories to tell. He has stories of being a POW to the Germans, storming forts, and according to him, disemboweling a man with a garden trowel. Even in his old age, he can recollect them quite clearly. His most interesting story, however, is from December of 1944. He had escaped from a German POW camp, where he was put while they prepared for transferal to a concentration camp. It was during his time on the run he came to a small German village. The people, who were no fans of Adolf, hid from the Gestapo. However, there would be no need. The following is his story as written in his journal. I believe the date was December 5th or 6th. The people hid me from Hitler's men, but seemed fearful to walk the street at night. The children were excited of the coming of St. Nicholas, I gathered. Hitler had tried to scrub away any religious influence on the holiday, but in small villages such as this, the people did not adhere to all of the Führer's guidelines. I was hidden with a family of 4, 2 children, a mother, and her father. The father of the children was conscripted to Hitler's army. The children were about 9 or 10, if I had to guess. I didn't see them that much, as I was beneath the floor, with a small window as my only company, as the moonlight shone through the glass. I heard the mother speak with who I can only presume was the SS looking for me. They barked something in German, and then the air was silent. I heard one of the lesser Nazis say, and this is rough translation as I don't know much German, "Commander, we must be going." His voice seemed almost frightened. I heard sleigh bells, and noticed the Nazi voices get more panicked in tone. The door shut, and the children were placed in the cellar. I assume that was the cellar, with me. I looked across the road out of my window and saw a silhouette in the night. The figure appeared to wear a cloak and a set of goat horns. This would be strange enough, but it was also on top of a home. I heard screaming from above me, the scream of the mother and the Nazis. There was a crash, and I felt a chill in the air. I silenced the children, who at this point were understandably frightened. There were gunshots, then silence. I expected to hear the barking of the Gestapo, but instead, I heard heavy steps, like hooves but far too large. Chains scraped on the floor above the children and I. The door to the hidden area swung open. The son, I believe his name was Claus, let out a shriek and suddenly got snatched up through the floorboards, same with the little girl. I wasn't going to sit there and let this happen. I rose from my hiding place, shaken but undeterred. The bodies of the mother and the Gestapo and her father lay gutted and strewn about. The gore on the being's horns named it the culprit. It was putting the daughter in a large sack on its back, where I could see movement from what I could only assume was other children. It wore many furs and chains. It had a hunched disposition. "Stop!" I yelled at the cloaked figure. It turned, standing upright from his hunched position. It stood easily 9 or so feet tall. It had the body of a man, with long, sharp, knife-like fingers. The horn were a part of its person, growing from its goat head. It smiled at me, with crooked, rotten teeth. Its eyes were also very much goat-like. Among its many chains were sleigh bells, jingling as it moved. I grabbed the pistol from the Gestapo's dead hand and fired upon it. It didn't move. It hardly seemed fazed. It let out a cackle and left the home. Why had it not killed me? I ran after it and saw many other homes in the village were similarly ransacked, bodies strewn about, and their fireplaces seemingly demolished. It threw its large bag into a sleigh, pulled by 9 hellish goats. The sleigh itself was adorned with many furs and chains. Human faces in anguish also were visible, though I can't be sure if they were actual faces or merely representations. I heard the cries of children as it gave me one more grin. It said to me simply,
"Forlice Krampus not."
It whipped the goats, and they ran off into the night. That night I would hear many screams in the distance. I noticed the children remaining in the village 2 mornings later were greeted with a great deal of gifts. I left after 2 days and continued to Allied territories, ducking Gestapo at every turn. Ever since I was a kid, he insisted that all of his grandchildren and children stay at his home on December 5th, and he always made sure the fire burns hot. Personally, the last half of 2017 has been pretty exhausting. The most draining part, both emotionally and physically and financially, has been the laborious task of moving my father into an aged care facility due to his rapidly advancing dementia. He lives in Tasmania, where I grew up. I am currently working and living in Brisbane, which is about 2,500 kilometers, or 1,500 miles for you Imperials, to north of Tasmania. I have been making the 3.5-hour flight down to Tasmania about twice a month to sort out my dad's situation. I have been busying myself by fixing up his empty, dilapidated home in order to get it ready to be sold. I moved out all his furniture and belongings, save for a pile of blankets and pillows that I turn into a makeshift bed on the floor while I'm visiting. The house is situated in a semi-rural area, surrounded by overgrown trees and bushes. It's an old house. It's damp. Everything creaks, and there is currently no electricity, which makes the nighttime very creepy. The house itself is not very secure. No alarm system. The doors have locks, but a forceful nudge will pop the door right open. I flew in on Christmas Eve in the late evening, picked up my hire car, and made the long drive down toward the house. I stopped at a mate's place, who lives about 10 minutes from my dad's place, to have a few beers and talk about the year that had just passed. After a couple hours, I realized that I had probably surpassed the legal blood alcohol limit to drive. My mate's legendary wife dropped me off at dad's and offered to come back in the morning to pick me up and go back to their place to get my car. A Christmas miracle. I entered my dad's house around midnight. Inside the house was pitch black, and in my slightly drunk state, I flipped the light switch and nothing happened. Oh yeah, that's right. No power. Using my phone as a light to navigate my way through the house over the creaky floorboards, I noticed that some of the tools that I had left laying around inside the house had been stolen. I sighed and accepted the fact that it was my own stupid fault for leaving them out in an unsecure house. Some kids probably noticed that no one is living there and took advantage of the situation. It was unsettling knowing that someone had been in there, but I didn't bother calling the police over a hammer, wrench, and screwdriver that came up to a grand total of about $16.50. Good news was the big toolbox, which I keep locked up in the laundry cupboard that houses my more expensive power tools, were still there and intact. I studied the padlock and the space around it, and it seemed pretty scratched up and dented, like someone had crudely attempted to pry it open. Nice try. I said out loud to myself. The toolbox is very big and heavy, too big for one person to carry, unless you're Andre the Giant. Exhausted, I went into one of the furnitureless bedrooms and made my makeshift bed out of blankets and pillows. I couldn't get comfortable, and it was taking me a while to drift off to sleep. As I was laying there, the only sounds I could hear over the ringing of my tinnitus was a gentle rustle of wind through the trees. I could also hear what sounded like an unmistakable crunch of boots on the gravel driveway that went up the side of the house. I tried to listen harder. Then there was a loud gong sound of something solid coming in contact with the metal railing that leads up to the back door. This makes me sit up, wide-eyed, while my heart starts to race. Maybe it was a wallaby or a possum. I sit there as still as possible, just listening. I can hear the sound of the trees and the wind and nothing else for a few moments, so I start to calm down. This is interrupted by the pop and squeak of the back door being pushed open. Crap. I freeze, not knowing what to do. I could hear footsteps creaking through the back of the house, and I hear the laundry cupboard being opened. I was up the other end of the hallway, but I could hear whispering. The only words I could make were, "There, shh, make it quick." I pull myself together and pull out my phone to call the police. I chat to the dispatcher while burying my head under the pillow to muffle my voice. I explain the situation to the dispatcher and she says the police are on their way. While this is happening, I can hear a chink sound of what I assume was the lock of the toolbox being broken. The dispatcher suggests that I lock the door of the room I am in. I agree, and as I slowly pad over across the room to the door, one of the floorboards creaks so freaking loudly. I freeze and hear dead silence from the laundry. They must have heard. After about 30 seconds of standing still, I try to take another step and get yet another high-pitched creak. But this seems to work in my favor because I hear my new house guests scatter away out the back door. I lock the bedroom door and tell the dispatcher that I think they have gone. She tells me to stay put until the police arrive, and I tell her I am more than happy to comply. After about 5 minutes, the cops arrive, and the dispatcher bids me farewell. The police did a search of the area and found nothing, as expected. They had tried to break open the toolbox. One of the cops says, "Why didn't they just use bolt cutters? Amateurs." And we gave a little laugh. I explained to the police about how when I came home, the tools were left laying on the floor were stolen, and that the toolbox looked like it had already been attempted to be broken into. Upon hearing that, the other cop stated his theory about how events took place. They probably broke in earlier tonight before you got here. They grabbed what they could, tried to open the toolbox and couldn't, and then left to go get something to open it with. While they were gone, you came home and then they arrived back here to open the toolbox. I doubt they were dangerous. Probably just kids. Good timing, I think to myself. I make a report and that's that. I stayed up until sunrise and then decided to get a couple of hours of sleep until my mate's wife, Lucy, came to pick me up to collect my car. I asked if I can keep my tools at their place for safekeeping, to which they agree. I drove down to my dad's old folks' home and had Christmas lunch with him and his new elderly buddies. The following day I go to a hardware store and purchase some newer, sturdier door locks. My name is John, and please, if anyone is out there, respond immediately. It started great. Families in from out of town, kids running around having fun, and me sipping on a beer with my wife. I couldn't have imagined that night any better. And, well, at least it was a grand finale to a great life, a beautiful prologue, only delaying the inevitable. It was 12:21 a.m. We were all getting tired and everyone was ready for the day of fun that awaited. I rose from the couch, said goodbye to our guests, and grabbed the kids to get them ready for bed. Man, I really would do anything to see them again. Anyways, we all went to sleep, ready for Christmas to come, truly feeling the joy that most feel as that wonderful day approaches. At least, that's what I thought I felt. Now, I'd describe it as more of a dread, not the childish anticipation to see what you've gotten, but the anticipation of a far more sinister event. Eventually morning came, but not the way I thought it would. My wife was already out of bed, and I immediately thought I slept in and missed a portion of the fun. I quickly hopped out of bed, threw on some more flattering clothes, and stepped out into the hall. As I turned to walk down the stairs, I could already feel that something was off. You know that feeling, when you can sense that something isn't quite right, but you can't put your finger on it. Except I quickly found out what was wrong. I step out into the living room and quickly notice that everything is wrapped, intact and silent. Not even the morning chirp of a bird outside, or the scuttling of children as they hurried down to receive their gifts. It was a strange, uneasy silence that was unnerving, to say the least. I called out to my wife, my voice cutting through the silence like a knife, to no response from anyone. It wasn't that I was already feeling immense amount of dread, but that exact moment my heart sank. I couldn't explain it. With the lack of sound and the lack of a response from anyone, it just made me shiver. As a fully grown human, I realized I should try to rationalize things. Perhaps they went out for breakfast, or perhaps they went to my mother's house early. But either way, why wouldn't they wake me? I didn't care at that moment. I was just trying to find a simple answer to a complex question. Starting to grow with panic, I took a glance around my surroundings and started to notice even more inconsistencies. There was a thin layer of dust on every surface around the house, even though we were just hosting a massive party yesterday. I inspected the presents underneath the tree and noticed that each and every tag on each and every present was void of writing, even though I strictly recall writing down my children's names on multiple presents. I turned on the television, expecting some comfort from the background noise, but instead, I just received static. Every single channel, simply static. Left with no other options, I decide to walk outside. I was met with a black and white landscape, void of sound, life, and any other feature that would show active life within the area. I tried calling out, but I was paralyzed with a sense of dread and fear. Instead, I merely squeaked and froze in place. I think we can all recognize the feeling that you are being watched, but multiply that by tenfold. You would be met with the extreme anxiety I felt in that exact moment. A feeling of helplessness and complete and total fear. I could almost feel something looming behind me, but with every look you take, it hides just barely out of sight. Whatever that thing was, it took the life out of whatever that place is. It took away everything you can imagine that would provide a sense of comfort, and replaced it with a dark presence in the air. I retreated back inside my home, although it barely helped to ease my fear I've been building up for the past few minutes. I could still feel it somewhere, watching and waiting. I chose the only thing I could think of, which was to check my phone to see if this was some incredibly well thought out prank, or if I was truly alone in this nightmare of a world. I've locked myself in the bathroom now, typing this out and hoping that someone, somewhere, is still on this plane of existence, Please, if you're out there, reply immediately. I need to know I'm not the only one in this hell on earth. Please.